All right. We will call the meeting to order at 5:29 p.m. on October 19th, 2020, starting with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Start with Bruce for the member introductions.
Bruce Damon, Ward 1, Facilities.
Elder Physical Ward 2.
Chairman Madras Collins, Ward 3, Curriculum Committee.
Jake Langley, Superintendent.
Megan Parks, at large and chair.
Tanya Whitlow, Ward 4, Negotiations. Linnea Hopkins, Ward 5.
Ron Potvin, Ward 6.
Thank you. Agenda item number 3, to receive a COVID-19 update as it relates to Lewiston Public Schools.
So we last week had a couple of things that we monitored and followed. It ended up turning out to be some waiting for test result situations. They worked out to be in the negative. We continue to monitor those kinds of situations actively. We have at times people who have gotten to get tested, but it's been days since they've been in school. They've stayed home, which to me is a good sign for community that they're watching those symptoms. And if someone in the house is sick, that they're keeping kids home to make sure that we're being responsible about community spread and everybody else's health and wellness. A couple of quick notes. Our bus driver situation, we did have someone step away last week. And so we had just increased the busing capacity, actually more so for here to eliminate that later run. And then we had to default back to a bit of a supported structure behind that. Things are fine, just so you know, if you're hearing anything in the community, that it's gone good direction and then a step in the other direction. Another component of our COVID update, I would say, is teachers are really feeling like it's a lot of work. And so we'll be working with the LEA and the management team and with all of you to figure out how we can support people who really are, they're working very hard. And it's like, hard way to explain it is, well, the best way I can explain it, I should say a hard way to explain it, but the best way I can explain it is there's moments in education where you're working with a kid or with a student and things click and you have that kind of teachable moment, that aha moment. It just feels like with a mask and with distancing, some of those feel-good moments are not as present as they used to be. I've talked with a number of teachers, met with some representatives of the LEA, and I think everybody's kind of feeling it. But what teachers don't seem to want is time away from their kids. And so we're going to have to look at ways to be creative, and we'll problem solve together. And we'll be bringing something back to you to try to figure out a way to support teachers and make sure they have what they need from a time frame perspective, but without losing time with the kids, which is something that they've been very passionate about. But it's a real challenge. I think the mask and the distancing and the sanitizing and the spacing and there's so many little pieces of education that are, they kind of make you feel good. They warm your heart a little bit and it's restricted. I think it's the same everywhere we go and we all kind of feel it, but I think teachers especially definitely feeling it. Those are kind of the highlights. I'll answer any questions that you have.
Yeah. So with the schedule, I think Bruce and I were kind of talking about this. We both had different interpretations of what it was supposed to look like this year on Wednesdays. And if you could just clarify what Wednesdays are supposed to look like, if we're continuing to follow those, that looks like.
So it varies between different levels. And so you have your remote students who have some remote instruction on Wednesdays. You have your hybrid students that have remote components on the Wednesdays as well with a teacher check-in. The state language wants us checking in and from an attendance perspective with students as much as we can and on a daily basis. So that builds in some of that expectation. The day is shortened, I guess, from a teaching and learning perspective. And then teachers have some time in the afternoon or administration for PD and things of that nature. And there's an effort to put work in or to do work around social emotional learning. One of the things that we're hearing, again, not from everyone, but from some people, is that that's an added thing that teachers feel like they have to do, is to try to provide that SEL piece. They think it's important, but it's another added thing that they have to learn for, they have to plan for, they have to make videos for, they have to meet with kids and push out. And so it's a challenge.
Now, was there a different plan? I feel like in my mind, we were supposed to have like no school on Wednesdays so that there was teaching, so there was cleaning in the buildings. Am I mistaken there?
So Wednesdays for staff is optional for them to be in the building or not. That's how that's been built. I think that's been an agreeable situation. They are able to do some more of the routine cleaning on Wednesdays because there's much less traffic, things of that nature. But it is a lesser of a day, but there's still that connected piece. We actually discussed today some possibilities, just getting feedback from teachers through the LEA. Could those Wednesdays look a little different? And I think that that's what I really want to look hard at, because the Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday piece, they have students in front of them. And the overwhelming voice from the teachers is, I don't want to lose time with my kids. We have too much work to do, and it's nice to see them. But I really think that we want to get another look at those Wednesdays. That may be upsetting to some people. Parents may want to have work for their kids and contact with their teacher if we do something different. And there's also some curriculum components. I've had some people express that, especially at the high school level, I've got to get through this curriculum. And if you tell me that Wednesday is no longer a day for that work to be done, it's like that delicate balance between I really need that day to do my prep and get some things done versus I don't want to get behind by losing a day.
But don't teachers always have that ability to prep on their own time? That's really that important to them, or is that frowned upon?
Well, I think it's a balance. I won't be naive in that a lot of teachers, every teacher that I know, does work beyond the hours. When the bell rings at the end of the day, they don't just wash their hands of it. I happen to be married to a teacher in our district, and she works nights, weekends, you name it, and I'm sure it's no different for other teachers. But I do think there's a line. It's one thing to say, hey, Sunday afternoon I'm going to go into the building and I'm going to do some work because I just want to be ready for the week. And how do I not go in most of Sunday to have some of this stuff prepared just to get through Monday, Tuesday? And so trying to draw that line between what I think our teachers have committed to professionally to work, the hours it takes to be a teacher, and that fine line between what are we asking them to do and do they have the time legitimately to do it?
So you'll be giving us some recommendations?
Yeah, we met with the LEA this afternoon, but we had already been talking about it over the last week. But I think we have some ideas that are workable that we want to bring back to you.
I just, again, from people who are remote students, I just hope that there still is some sort of check-in on Wednesdays, because I think it's important for kids who are at sea, that they're kind of interacting with the teacher, interacting with some of the peers. So I hope that's taken into consideration.
That's one of those hard ones, yeah.
Mr. Potter?
How's the other side of it going in terms of relationship with remote learning? In progress with this, are people embracing it? Are you seeing results, positive results so far? Or?
So my biggest concern is either whenever kids are not in front of us or the kids who are not in front of us, which is the cohort C. I think teachers are doing great work to engage students, to provide the materials, but there have been some frustrations with students not accessing them, or even some situations that have been shared around just family decisions. We're going to go away this week. We're just going to do that when we get back. You've got a teacher planning and pacing and trying to coordinate this from an engagement perspective, and that's more work for them on the back end of it. So I would highly encourage people that if you have a remote student, that you're doing your best to support that effort and keeping kids on pace. It's not easy. It's just not. But it's. I want people to understand it is hard for a teacher to plan for a group of students who are remote and then have some students just not access it or be dismissive and say, I'll just do it later. That's not right. If you've agreed to be remote, I'd like to ask families and the students to make that effort to get the work done and keep with the class.
What's the connection there? I mean, is there any effort to have a meeting, or is it strictly by phone, or is it just emails across the internet? Or?
So there's been phone calls, emails, but also a number of these remote classes have video sessions. So kids are inviting it into those. Teachers can create new links to have a meeting with parents and whatnot. I think the biggest thing, and it's coming along quickly, is the technology. We still have some students that don't have one-to-one, so it's our remote kids have one-to-one, but we still have a couple of grades. Dave could probably give us a closer update. I mean, he gets a shipment of something, I feel like daily, and he's just trying to get it out to people. But some of the grades don't have that one-to-one piece. So to build off of the cohort C kids, some are totally engaged and doing what they should be doing. Some were struggling to engage, and some were struggling to engage at all. And then the non-school days for the hybrid students, we have some students doing everything they're being asked to do. So they come to school Monday, Tuesday, and then Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, they get their pieces done, they come back in with it. And then we have some students that do nothing on those other days. And that's that. Trying to figure out that balance right now with students, and we're encouraging them. The hard thing is we don't know what's going on in their world, and I'm not comfortable giving a directive that we penalize kids for not accessing the learning. But what's the line, and what's the weight on that line? It's a challenge.
I'm having just that discussion with my ex-husband right now, because my youngest son is turning 13 in the month. He's in middle school. He goes into class and he gets Thursdays and Fridays, but Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, he's home. And his dad isn't interested in monitoring. So he's 60-some assignments behind. His dad left it with me for 3 days and thought I was going to fix it all. I'm like, dude, this is 60 assignments. I will do what I can, but you need to parent, or we'll be going back to court. Which means that I have a 13-year-old moving on me, but it's not hands-off. I mean, parents need to be monitoring, the students need to be actually doing the work.
We have some cases where the student's not doing their schoolwork, but they're watching their siblings because their parents are at work.
Yeah.
You know, so it really is a spider web of reasons why, all the way up to and including I procrastinated, didn't get it done. You know, and so COVID has made this learning platform a challenge.
You know, the high school has firmed up some extra resources around probably a couple of years ago when we had the COVID.
Yeah.
As far as kind of like, I know I'm part of specifically for special ed kids, but has that been kind of firmed into place even for all around for the LC kids?
So I had a conversation with Pam Bushey, our special ed director. We've gone through some different IPs that are challenging. She's talked about the ways in which they're going to meet them, or meet their needs, up to and including we do have 2 or 3 staff that are providing in-home supports because it was on the IEP and the family's going to use PPEs and all that. And staff have said, I'm comfortable with this plan. So we have actually some staff go into homes. Again, that's rare and that's IEP driven, but at first, when we first dove into this, I had actually said, no, we need to find another way. And we looked at some outside resources that we could contract with. And it ended up working out that, at least for now, that our staff are going in, again, only with a few homes and with PPEs in place, and it's voluntary.
Well, like this, kids who want special ed, like I know, at least a couple years ago, people have reached out and saying that, we're trying to navigate through some things, and some extra resources were needed, even for non-special ed kids.
Yeah, so I've heard less on that as of late, so I'm hopeful that the routines, now that they're established, people are starting to find that way and understand how to go about it. There is a chunk of time, that's why high school and middle school students get out a little earlier, so they can need time to provide some extra support. One thing I have heard though, from a math teacher recently, for a direct email, someone that I've known for years and trust, she said that it's just such a challenge because in that window of time, I want to support kids with the math, but the demand is much higher than I have. and it spills into 3 and 4 o'clock in the afternoon, well after, when they really are required to work by far. She's committed to the kids and doing it, but she's tired. She's really working hard to make that end meet, and those are the things that we want to get better at and try to problem solve. Because we can't ask her to continue to do that, and she's not the only one. Our teachers are committed to our kids, but what do you do if a kid says, "Hey, I can Skype at 4 o'clock, can you help me out?" Our teachers are saying yes most of the time, and that's well beyond the scope of what they typically would even be asked to do. And so it's a good question. We have teachers working to that end, but it's really hard. I had another teacher, or a story shared with me from a different teacher, that they have a big assignment due very soon, and there have been benchmarks along the way, things that you should complete and submit. And there's a log, in Google, of what things have kids access, how much time they spent there, and that teacher's trying to plan around, what supports kids might be, looking at areas where they might be struggling in the log, and the vast majority of the class has not yet opened up the pre-parts of the assignment. And so those are those really, if you're a teacher and you put in that time and you're looking at the logs to see where you can support kids, and you find that the majority of them have not even opened up the early components of the assignment, it is a big project. That's really challenging. When I say challenging, I mean it's frustrating. It's hard for people. They're working hard.
Do we have numbers yet? Or has it started to quiet down, I guess, on the students who are in a cohort that are switching to strictly online versus the kids who are strictly online coming back? Has that sort of?
I think that's settled for now. I say that cautiously, but it's settled for now. We have had some movements because of family situations. We're trying to limit them so that teachers don't have only caseloads day to day. But we could probably pull some demographics around that.
Do you have more students, do you know off the top of your head if more students originally signed up for in-person and switched to online or vice versa?
We've actually seen all three. We've seen kids who sign up for online only, and we've reached out to say, they're not engaging. We know your student really should be coming to school. If you're comfortable with that from a health perspective, and we've had some families make that decision. We've had some families, I know one situation where family has, I believe, 4 kids, and had all 4 kids home on one day. It made life easier from a transportation perspective, but to help them do the work, it became unbearable. So they actually split the family. So 2 came on Monday, Tuesday, and 2 came Thursday, Friday. So they're only trying to navigate 2 kids the other 2 days. It made life a little easier. But there's movements kind of.
It's still happening.
It's still happening, and I'm asking administrators to do their best to hold the line unless there's a family need. And I say that for the teachers, so they don't have huge numbers, or they don't have moving parts. I've been in Mr. Laelis's class, and now I'm in Mr. James Collins' class, and moving back and forth, traveling.
I had a really great conversation the other day with Darby Ray from Bates College. She said the college kids really miss being in the schools and miss helping the kids.
And we miss them.
She said, please keep the conversation ongoing. If we need to have students that are available to do online Zoom tutoring or
Yep.
whatever, they're more than willing. So just keep that bug bouncing around
Yeah,
because
we actually have an MOU with them that we signed a couple weeks ago now to do just that. So they can tutor remote, where they can set up time and provide some assistance. So we're going to get that as well.
Right now, we promote it out to families.
Yep.
we were meeting. My kids are so miserable. Sorry. I think everybody's miserable.
Any update on the deadline on the COVID funding? Any movement on that?
What we've heard is, and I say heard because this is what I'm hearing kind of from different sources, that there's potential for a new stimulus package that will have different dates altogether. So there's not too much pressure on moving this particular one. We're doing our best to spend what we've been allotted. Again, that December 30th it's a hard line. It's got to be here and in use. When we explored a number of things, can we get big mechanical units, just get them here by 7:30. They said, no, it has to be here, installed, and used. So that's a challenge. I know that there's been a couple of orders that I've said yes to because of where we're at, that we're searching to make sure we can have a cancellation with them, because if it comes in early January, we can't use the CRF $1 or $2 for that. So we're going to be mindful.
Your response?
Yeah, on that same topic, I think it's just such a frustrating, arbitrary deadline. That's, there's a limited amount we can do about it, but I wonder if it would be worth having the school committee consider a resolution and send it to our members of Congress and to the administration, urging them to change it, and for whatever it's worth, at least we've officially put down, the concerns that we have, and the way that this arbitrary deadline is hampering our district's ability to serve the kids.
Yeah, I have reached out to delegations, both state and federal. I started with state to see what we could shift, because I didn't know if it was a state-created date. It very much goes back to federal, and the language of December 30th is connected to the Treasury. Our currently elected officials have been very responsive with messaging and trying to do what they can. And I may have missed this last time, in case I didn't. There's a piece of this in that the COVID relief funds went to all states, but the states made some decisions on how those funds would be used. And Maine was one of the states that decided to let local school districts spend a piece of the money, but not every state did that. So I think if every state did it, there'd be a push nationally to just move this date, but because it's just some states, the push is not there. A larger voting body perspective.
Anything else? Is that all?
Yeah, I think for me, that's it. I mean, I think the communication protocols are working well. We've actually had other districts reach out to us to say, hey, what do you do when this stuff happens? And we've shared that with them, and it seems to be okay, but we're always open to input so we can get better, get the message out. And, we are being transparent with information and share what's appropriate in all 7 languages and getting it out.
Agenda item 4 is public input. Members of the club may address the school committee for up to 3 minutes on non-agenda items now and on agenda items later. Comments that pertain to staff, personal matters, or a student issue should be directed to the superintendent or the appropriate staff member of Lewiston Public Schools. Public comments shall be directed to the school committee and be brief, not repetitive, and related to the matter at hand. Before starting, please state your name and address. Are there any members of the public that would like to speak? And is there anyone? There's no one? I can't see that far. Okay.
No.
Thank you. Agenda item number 5, to receive and approve delegate assembly topic items from the 2020 MSBA Fall Conference.
All right, I believe in your folder, there are 4 items that were shared. That was actually.
06, October 19th.
05 MSBA proposed new resolutions. Is that what you're looking for?
We got an email from Suzanne, it's like 25 p.m. We're going to be probably on it. And she can have that note forward.
So the intent was to talk about the 4 items and just see if there are any areas of focus that the school committee would like to have brought.
Mr. Joe.
Yeah, I was also just hoping that we could take sort of brief guidance votes on each of these. And I don't think that, I anticipate the first three being pretty much hard to object to, but I just was hoping I could get guidance from the committee on how they'd like me to proceed representing. this.
I think you take a look at the first three, and I think that it kind of speaks for itself, and certainly can understand it. The last one there, the remote participation.
Yeah.
I personally have a lot of concerns about that. I've had enough people in the lower end of our tier in the city come to me and tell me, we can't tie into this, we can't tie into that. You know, there seems to be, there's still a technology gap. And if we throw this out, I think there's two things here. One, accessibility. I think we're not there yet, and I think it's a dangerous piece, because I know way too many politicians who would take the lazy way out and just as soon stay at home and get on their computer and not have to come someplace and face to face people. The second part is that accessibility for what's the word I'm looking for people to be able to see what's going on. And you know, there's this a little bit of undercurrent that, you know, once things start going online on computer, you don't really know what's going on, and you don't see what's happening here or what's happening there, as opposed to when you're in a face-to-face and people are here, and, you know, you could have an issue. Sure, you take a look at the screen and there's 200 people weighing in. Well, that doesn't quite carry the same thing as if 200 people show up here at school regarding an issue. So I just think this lady with just concerns, and the other three, I think, speak for themselves. And, you know, I totally support those two.
I know, I've spoken to some of my neighbors, my immediate neighbors. Several of them have several small children in the house, and they are kind of frustrated with the situation, having to work with Spectrum. Because when you've got 4 or 5 computers plus phones all hooked on to the same Wi-Fi connection at the same time, that's a lot of bandwidth to whittle down to barely anything. And that's, I think, part of that connectivity issue. And I know we're not going to get high-speed internet to the entire city in the next 2 weeks. So I would do what you can. I don't know what to do to help, but hang in there. I get the pain. I understand it. My kids moved out and suddenly actually have access to the internet. It's strange. But I get it. And it is something to keep on our minds, because just because they have devices and just because they have internet doesn't mean they have enough capacity on that internet to be able to do what needs to be done.
We don't need, or you don't, when you're there, you don't need to speak on every one either. I
Oh,
think-
no, I know.
Okay.
My understanding was that I was voting on everyone. Is that right or no?
I don't remember.
I don't remember it either.
I think they just sort of do a general discussion, and then they ask if there's any school district representative that wants to speak, and then if it comes up, and then there's a larger discussion, I think then there's voting, but I don't even know that
I
there's
do
a.
know now that I recall it.
Okay.
They vote on everything.
Oh, they
You just, you sit in your seat, you raise your hand. It's not real official.
And you're not agreeing to anything necessarily
Right.
for resolution purposes.
Yeah.
Maybe agree to a resolution, but not,
Right.
it's not a directive to this board to do.
Right.
And it's all of this, you know, it's support, right? I mean, this seems like we wouldn't want to vote against. I mean, I see what you're saying over here about remote participation. That might be something maybe we wouldn't be fully supportive, but.
And that one's
that's what
not
you're
just
saying, right?
Yeah, I just think
supporting.
it's a time issue.
Yeah.
maybe not now, maybe in the future, but we're not there yet.
Right.
Yeah, and this is supporting a law change. It's not just supporting remote participation, it's supporting changing the actual law.
Right.
I personally feel very strongly about the equity in education piece. Assuming everybody here does, but I just wanted to state that. Yes, sorry.
So in that respect, based on what I've heard from those, I can vote for the first three, I will vote no on the fourth one, and I will speak at the end.
All right.
The way it's written leaves a lot of subjectivity. What some people might consider a health emergency in one community might not be somewhere else. You're up in Schenectady County, apparently there's no health emergency. If you're in York County, it might be even, and we're talking about statewide school, the city council is still meeting remotely, if they feel it is. I think that the language itself is ambiguous enough, subjective enough, that who's making, which school board is deciding that the building that we're meeting in is contaminated, so it's a health emergency, so we have to revert to that, versus somebody else saying something else. I think unfortunately, the way it's written really doesn't lend a lot of guidance for anyone. And I think that's where the biggest problem is with the way I see that. My gut reaction is that the legislature probably gonna pass that, because when you have remote communities where there's miles and miles between, where people live, I think that you're gonna see some pushback, particularly from the rural areas, to allow this to happen. And I think in some of those areas, it may be a good thing. For us, it's probably not, but we're not really going to be able to carry the day.
Do you know if currently we're able to meet remotely if we choose to do so? Is that because we're still in the extended state of emergency? So once the state of emergency ends, that's no longer an option? Is that correct? Yes.
It's my inclination. I don't know for a fact. I still don't know of a law that, and I'm not saying it doesn't exist, but when it said it would change law, I don't know if that varies connected to charter, or if that's a state law, that you have to meet in person, and because of the emergency order, that we've been flexible with it. But what this says is more or less what we do now.
Right.
That if someone needed to remote in, that they could.
Do you, Dave, know anything about this as from a technology perspective? No?
I'm trying to hear it from you, but what was the gist of it?
So right now we have the option to meet remotely if we choose to, like the city council is doing. Is that just because of the question we're asking is that going to end when the state of emergency ends? Is that why they're proposing a law? Do you know anything from a technology, like have you received input on that?
I haven't received any input on it, basically, so, no.
No, okay. Mr. Madeiras comment.
The answer to your question is yes. That there is a state law that prohibits government bodies like ours from meeting remotely unless there's an emergency order that says that we can't for health reasons. And so that's, if the emergency order was to be lifted tomorrow, it won't be, but if it was, then we wouldn't be able to Skype people in who were on the committee. And we would have to meet in person. It doesn't mean we can't take testimony remotely. That's totally fine. We can do that however we want to going forward. But the members of the committee, in order to participate in committee business, would have to be in the room, and the room would have to be open to the public. And so the suggestion here is to allow boards to make a decision about whether they want to allow for partial or complete remote deliberation, even if there isn't a health problem in the future, just because they want to. And that's the suggested law change.
So is it about a quorum in person?
Well, it's about having people, if you're not under the current law, if there wasn't an emergency, if you weren't in person, you couldn't participate. And the suggestion here is that we should allow boards to meet partially or entirely not in person. which I think there are strong arguments for and against some of what we've heard tonight, and so that's one of the reasons I wanted guidance on how to vote on this.
Any other comments? Do you feel like you have a
Yes.
guidance you need?
Yes.
Okay. Agenda item number 6, to receive and approve nominated members of the school committee to attend the 2020 MSBA Virtual Fall Conference.
So just a quick presentation on my part. We did have discussion around that, but we need, by rule, we have to vote those members attending the conference and not just the delegate.
Who we voting on?
So it was Kiernan as a member of the delegation and Renee as an alternate.
Oh, all right, so, what?
Yes,
I just want, this would also include anyone else who wanted to attend
Yes.
if they wanted to.
regular attendees can just attend.
I think, well, that was my question.
So we have to register, and
Right.
and it requires a vote to put people's names on the registration.
Oh, we've never done it that way before. That's what it is now?
Yeah.
Okay,
So it always has been.
I've already got it filled out, but
okay.
I can't submit it until I,
So,
I can add to it.
so then the question would be, is there anyone else besides myself and Member Hawkins who want to attend this thing?
Will you be attending the whole,
I mean, yeah.
And it's virtual.
right?
Yeah.
Was there anyone else interested in attending?
I
No?
move to nominate Kiernan Jarvis Collins as the fall conference delegate and Linnea as the alternate.
Second.
Ward 1? Oh, was there any further discussion on that? Ward 1?
Yes.
Ward 2?
Yes.
3?
Yes.
4?
Yes.
5?
Yes.
6?
Yes.
7, and myself is yes, and Miss Wright, or 7 and Miss Wright are absent. I don't know what I'm saying, I apologize.
It passes 7-0.
Thank you. Agenda item number 7, report from the city council representative who is unfortunately absent tonight.
Can I
Agenda
ask
item,
if these are excused absences?
are we announcing these publicly?
I just raised the issue just because it's been an issue.
So-
So,
It does get recorded in the minutes
Right.
that then get approved. So it does become,
So if we approve the minutes, then that means that we're approving their absence.
Right.
I didn't realize that's how we were doing it. Okay,
then
that's good to know, right?
So at next week's meeting, there'll be minutes from tonight, and it'll list who was in attendance and who was absent. And it'll either say excused or unexcused, and then we vote on that. So if somebody were listed as excused and somebody on the committee was opposed, then they could ask to have that item set aside and vice versa. Is that correct?
it is
Okay.
procedurally we would go from there. I don't believe it's been prescribed in the procedure.
Okay.
Not to that.
I have another question. Yep. So when you guys put the minutes down, when the superintendent does the minutes, is who has the authorization to say it's excused or not excused? And then when we get the minutes later.
So ultimately, it's the board chair that makes that excused, unexcused designation. I will say that there's been good communication with board members who have not been able to be present.
And if we want to have a conversation in the future when the full board is here about whether or not everybody's comfortable having that announced, then we can do that. Report from the school committee chair. I just wanted to give an update on the City Spirit Committee, which was a citywide committee, but the Equity and Diversity Committee that was started as an ad hoc committee through the school department was ultimately absorbed by that. And I just wanted to provide an update that we've been doing weekly trainings, exploring equity and diversity, implicit bias, gender identity and sexual orientation, and a wide variety of other topics. And also meeting weekly with triads. We're all broken up into smaller groups and we're having more discussions on that. And in roughly 4 to 6 weeks, there will be a draft coming out for an equity statement, which in theory, Lewiston Public Schools will adopt, as well as both Lewiston and Auburn communities. And then we will have a full presentation from the City Spirit Committee at that time. And I have no other updates. Agenda item number 9, report from the superintendent.
So kind of piggybacking on that, the equity work doesn't stop for us. And so we've actually made a connection with USM to do an equity audit in our schools. And so it's a year-long process. We're going to work with them on that. Also involved in the main leadership development program. And the strategic focus around that for most public schools is, again, and this is work that I do in and around equity. I do feel like we're pretty well positioned to take some action on some things, and we've been working with the city and that group and the vision and how that's going to come forth. And with an audit, we ought to be able to move on some things and not just talk about it. So I look forward to it. I think we have some good next steps.
Are you close to forming your committee, or is that formed, or?
So they request 5 members, and we have some in-house folks, and I'm looking for a community member.
The audit for equity from USM, you said?
It's worked with USM, but I believe it's the Mid-Atlantic group that does it. It's the Mid-Atlantic
Now, is this
Association.
something that we're paying for?
There's a small fee. It was in discussion prior to my appointment. It seems like it's
It was in the budget then?
yes, my understanding is it's that. Yeah.
Okay,
And it's in connection to professional development.
yeah, oh, okay.
Yeah.
Right.
So I'm trying to get this right here. So first thing, we have a city group that's examining equity. This was called what?
So City Spirit started
City Spirit.
at the city level, yeah.
Okay, and they're gonna report out something,
Yes.
and that applies, their focus applies the whole city, right, not just the schools.
So the piece that we're working on right now, so City Spirit started as a city initiative after the death in Kennedy Park. And there was a lot of racial tension, and that's how City Spirit started a few years ago. After we had started under, I believe it was still under Bill, when we started the Equity and Diversity Committee here with the school committee, and that was to draft an equity statement for Lewiston Public Schools. Several members, the mayor at the time and the city council ended up getting involved because they wanted it to be a universal citywide equity statement for the schools and the city completely to make it more functional. And then that went on for a while. And then with some change in leadership, things shifted. And those two committees sort of merged to not duplicate the work that was being done. And so the City Spirit Committee absorbed the original school committee. And so City Spirit has a much wider goal, I guess. But right now, the chunk that's being worked on right now is to develop the equity statement.
So the equity committee that was formed within the school department is the one that's got absorbed by the city.
By City Spirit, yes.
And then thirdly, we have, I think, Physic made a motion to create something else of which you talked to add a board. This is going to focus on what that's different than what this city.
Yeah, so I think there's some differences in that, and part of what we're looking to do is to take the input from the city vision, to take the input from the audit, and the audit's going to look more at culturally responsive curriculum, equity-based components within our schools, areas that we can improve specifically, and then we take this committee this group that it's not a ad hoc committee as much as a group that I want to form under my umbrella, but include member Physic, anybody else who wants to be there, but to really get to work on the strategic vision of how are we actually going to do this within our schools.
This equity statement that's being worked on, are you part of this thing?
Yes.
Hasn't this been going on for like a couple of years?
It has,
No equity statements come out yet?
No, so with the shift in leadership, there was some difficulties, and that's ultimately what led to it being absorbed by the City Spirit. And then we didn't meet for an extended period of time when COVID started. We started meeting again, I believe, in the end of July, and we've been, so they got grant funding. And then we hired consultants, and now we've got consultants who are kind of taking the lead and going through this process to make sure. So there's a lot of people on it, and they want to make sure that we have input from stakeholders, which is obviously very important, and that the people who are at the table, who are working on it, fully understand equity, diversity, bias, all of that stuff. So that's really breaking it down to the core of making sure everybody really knows what we're doing. So we don't have people sitting at the table that have good intentions but aren't thoroughly trained on the things being discussed. So it's been a bit of a drawn out process, yes, but with a good intention at the end.
And part of that transition was Mayor Kayer, who was actively
Right.
involved in that work, who then became the mayor. And so it was a collaborative effort to begin with, so just.
Right, we had 3 different mayors, like the mayors swapped 3 different times during that, and then, yes, there was a lot of leadership changes. Did that answer your question?
One other update for me, we're getting real close to having our parent hotline working. So we'll broadcast that when it's up and running, but essentially we have Mr. Ford, who was a parent and community liaison that was brought on last year, last spring, and he would be the one to answer that phone call, and it connects you to the language of need and allows him to have that conversation to facilitate how to problem solve any questions family or parents or members of the community may have about their child's schedule, computer, what have you. So he'll have a tree of network communications that he can send that out to. Just another layer of support for our community. That's really it for me.
Agenda item number 10, school committee community announcements. Does anyone have anything going on in the community? Mr. Damon?
Well, there is a LHS expansion committee meeting tomorrow. 4
Here.
here in this room. And we've broken ground, I guess, so.
Ground has been broken.
Mr. Madros-Collins.
I want to take the community announcements opportunity to encourage members of the public to do 2 things. Number one, to get a flu shot to help us out in the schools and reduce the rates of flu this year, and allow as many kids to go to school as possible safely and have things be as healthy as possible. And number 2, along the same lines of safety and also civic duty, I want to encourage folks to take the opportunity to vote early and avoid lines at the polling place and go over to City Hall this week or next week and cast an early vote. It's simple, it's easy, it's fast, and it helps to avoid potential virus spreading with crowded polling stations on election.
Thank you.
Can I piggyback off of that too? Just remind people that as far as voting day goes, the Green Ladle, we have managed spaces so that the voters are separate from any students and they manage their side of things with students so that they mitigate any risk. Longley School will not have students that day. Next step in Impact Academy and Montello School will not have students that day because their facility is so used in direct contact with the public. I did work with city officials that there's no need to interrupt Monday or Wednesday. We have no students for them if they need to do any kind of pickup or cleanup afterwards. I did share an email, but I wanted to just say it publicly. We had considered the middle school because of potential crossover. Principal Mates really felt confident because of the reduced number of kids in the hybrid model that she could mitigate that with just flow of traffic from the middle school perspective. So the middle school does have school on voting.
I just want to ask on the middle school question. I know that in the past we've had some overflow from the middle school doing classes at the Armory. Are we doing that now or no?
We don't currently have any courses that happen at the
It's not set in stone yet, but coming up at the end of November, there's going to be a Healthy Neighborhoods / choice grant presentation coming up. We're moving into the second phase of the grant process, the implementation phase. So we should have all the information together by the end of November, do a presentation for the community in general. That will most likely be in a Zoom call. We're trying to figure out the logistics of all that so that people can come and watch the slideshow presentation, ask questions, get clarifications, things like that. I will keep people posted when we get that nailed down. We'll also have the opportunity after that initial public sort of Zoom call, if specific groups would like us to come and bring the presentation and do a more in-depth presentation, that may be possible as well.
Agenda item number 11 for future agenda items. Mr. Potman?
Jake, I got a question for you. Just wanted to get an update from you on, of course, when we make a recommendation on a future agenda item, it's going to take resourcing from you to get information and prepare things. With COVID going on, where are you at right now? Do you feel that you're behind? Are you where you think you should be? Can you taking on new agenda items? Do you need more time before?
I think we could take on new agenda items. I just want to be sensitive about what we're asking staff to do. So I think we're in a place where we could take on some more items.
That being said, not that I want to add anything, I just kind of want to know if there's a way of getting an update on the myriad of items that we've presented. Just wanting to know where they sit, when they may be getting addressed. I know we have, there's got to be at least 10 things that we put
Yeah,
out.
I can bring a list to the next agenda if you like to talk about that specifically, what's on the list of upcoming items.
Something I was supposed to ask you to add to an agenda, but I can't remember now. So, Mr. Collins.
Yeah, this has no immediate urgency, so this can be kicked for months if need be. But at some point, we should probably do an executive session to discuss leadership continuity to avoid the kinds of tribulations that our district experienced earlier this year.
Anyone else? All right, agenda item number 12, to enter into executive session to discuss personnel issues in accordance with 1 MRSA 4056A. Moved by Mr. Damon, seconded by Ms. Whitlow. Ward 1?
Yes.
2?
Yes.
3?
No.
4?
Yes.
5?
Yes.
6? 4?
Yes. I'm 6.
I don't know how to count. I apologize. I was saying 6, and then for some reason your 6 looked like a 5, and I confused myself. Yes.
Okay, can we get 5 minutes?
Yes.
I really want to get out.
The school committee is out of executive session at 7:41 PM.
Motion to adjourn?
Second,
Ward 1,
Yes.
2,
Yes.
3,
Yes.
4,
yes.
5,
Yes.
6,
Yes.
and yes. 7 and city council rep are absent.